When you're getting assets valued, firstly, I recommend asking a valuer what they think about the asset before you give them the price that you're thinking. That's the first thing. Okay. It's great to get the valuer's opinion. Now, the valuers won't want to give that opinion. They'll give you like a cap rate. Oh, I think it's about 6.5%, or I think it's about 7%. They'll give you a cap rate and you go, okay, fair enough. So what? Ask a bit more. Like, is it 16 million? Or in this case, for you guys, it might be like, is it 1.5 million or is it 1.75 million? Try and get a number from the valuer before you give your number. So in that engagement, ask them, you're almost approaching them like, look, I'm genuinely looking to you to give me assistance on where you think this asset should be trading, rather than, hey, I've contracted this at 2.5 million. Can you support it? Because valuers, remember, the job of a valuer is to determine what a willing buyer and a willing seller would contract an asset for. And if you've gone and put a price on it, you're essentially saying you're a willing buyer at that price. So that is the best form of evidence the valuer has, right? Whereas you're wanting to understand what is the market evidence and the movement in the cap rate environment and the rent and all of that good stuff. What is that telling you that this asset should transact for? And by approaching the valuer that way, you can get a very different set of numbers. Sometimes when you approach a valuer, and this is a good example, I'll show you how this is an example here. I went to the valuer and I said, look, mate, what do you think this asset should sell for? And he's like, look, probably close to 6 million, 5.8 to 6 million. I've then gone and contracted it at 5.25 million. Okay. And the value has then gone. So I've engaged the value. I said, I want my numbers first, as I show you how to do. I've got a script. You use the script, you send it to the value, you get the numbers first. Then the report comes later, only if you're comfortable with the numbers. Remember, two-stage valuations, numbers first, then the full report. So the numbers come through at 5.85. And I then told him, hey, mate, I've actually contracted this at 5.25. The value was like, oh, God, that's really difficult for me. I'm going to have to adopt that purchase price. So now for banking purposes, he's correct. Banks will want to adopt the lower of purchase price or valuation. Okay. So the question then became, well, the valuer was asking me, have you added enough value to this asset? Like, what have you done to this asset that makes that means it should be worth 6 million, 5.85 to 6 million. And I was like, I've done nothing. So he says, how did you secure such a good buying price? I said, well, it was a good negotiation tactic. Now, that's not something you can write in a valuation report, right? So what he then thinks is, how am I, this is what valuers think. How am I going to support a lower price than what I think this asset should have traded for? He's essentially giving me a compliment. Hey, Cal, you bought this well. Thank you very much. But that's not going to help me when I go to the bank. So I asked for him, okay, now I've got his numbers at 5.85, right? So I'm cool. I've got his numbers now. I can push that to the bank and I can say, guys, this is not a mortgage security valuation, but this is the first cut of the numbers. And if I go to a non-bank or I go to a secondary bank, like a second tier bank, they'll probably lend me on that. But I now need a full report. So we change the valuer. Valuer comes back. Hey, Cal, how am I going to make $5.25 million stack up in my valuation? And that's a serious conundrum for this valuer now because he's come out and he's told me he thinks it's worth 6 or 5.85. And now I've said I've contracted at 5.2. And he's now going, oh, I've got to backtrack here. How am I going to backtrack? And in a valuer's head, he wants to protect himself. That's why a valuation is an important document because, yeah, it puts a value on an asset, but they're also quite conservative in nature because if the bank relies on that valuation and it's incorrect, well, they come after the valuer. So he's always wanting to build in some conservatism. So in his head, he's going, oh my God, how can I adopt a lower valuation? And there's really two ways you can do it. You can either soften the cap rate, which means instead of the asset being 7.25, you could be like maybe 7.5 or 8, right? Or you can tighten the cap rate or adopt a tighter cap rate, but you soften the rent. Those are the two levers, the big levers you've got to play with. There are a couple of other assumptions, like you could adopt a little bit of capex that needs to be spent. Maybe there's 100 grand of capex that needs to be spent over the next 5 years. That might drop the value by 100 grand. You could put in a little bit about market reversionary rents and say, look, in 3 years' time, we think the market's going to be a little bit lower than it is today, and that might shave off 80 or 50, 80 grand. But the big movers here are cap rate and rent. Now, I'm showing this to you because the underlying thinking here is important for you. The valuer essentially then said, okay, Cal, which lever do you want me to play with? I can either adopt the rent that you're currently getting and a softer cap rate to get to call it 5.38. As you can see, 5.7 is about where I bought the asset. So he's kind of sitting at, call it 5.45, right? 7.4. Um, let's actually see what 7.45 is exactly. Yeah, it's pretty damn close. So he'll come in and adopt 7.45 if we keep the rent what it is today. Now, he was actually telling me that he thinks the asset is 6.75% asset. Now, if you put 6.75% in there, can you see how we get to that $5.8 million number? We're pretty close to it. So when we're having our conversations, again, I'm jotting all this down when I was on the phone to him. This is a valuer I've never used before, by the way. So I want to let you know that these are conversations you can have with a valuer that you've never used. Like, this is not an industry relationship of mine. Never used this valuer before in my life. Decided to give him a call. So this is the kind of conversation you can have. So when we're talking about numbers, cool. I was like 5.85 to 6 mil, around about there. I secured it at 5.85. Well, he thinks I should have secured it at 5.85. Then I've gone and executed it at 5.25. So he was suggesting to me that the cap rate should be 6.75. Now he can either adopt a softer cap rate at 7.45 to make sure that he gets this price right, or he can keep a tighter cap rate and adopt a softer rent, as in a lower market rent. Okay. Now, if he does that, what we should be seeing, this means that he can now adopt a 7% cap rate, right, at 350 grand a year. And what that'll do is it'll give you a gross price of 5 million. But then what he's essentially saying is, if you're getting 390 grand a year and he's assessing the market rent at 350, he's essentially saying that there's 40 grand a year in over rentage that he shouldn't be capitalizing, but you're going to receive it. So what he'll do is he'll go 40 grand a year times by 8 years left on the lease. I should probably make that 5 times 5 years left on the lease is another $200,000. And he'll just add that in face value to your valuation, to your core cap rate, add 200 grand, gets you in at 5.2. Now that's pretty damn close to 5.25. This is what the valuer actually wants to do right now. He's literally going, hey, Cal, here's a new set of numbers. I'm going to adopt that. And I'm going, why the hell would you adopt that? I want to be here. This is where I think we should be at 6.5. I want to protect the cap rate more than I want to protect the rent. And why is that? The reason being is that in a year's time or 6 months' time, when I want to revalue this asset, it's going to be easier for me to point to new rental evidence than it's going to be for me to point to new capitalization rate evidence. So that means that I could buy the asset today at an adopted cap rate of 6.5. In this case, let's call it 6.75, which is actually the true cap rate for an asset of this value. Yes, I'm allowing the valuer to adopt a lower rent. So let's say we're at 340. We're getting close to that 5.25 now. So he's probably going to be more like 340 in terms of net rental. I'm still getting the overage, right? So I'm still getting the right number for him. But what he's just done, he has now adopted a cap rate at 6.75. So in 6 months' time or a year's time, when I need to revalue this asset, he would have to show me evidence that that is untrue. As in, what he's done now is he has to defend the cap rate. He's suggested that's the cap rate. So this valuer, having valued it now for me, I know I'm going to use him in 6 months' time because I've just got him to defend 6.75. And I've said, look, do whatever you need to do with the rent, mate. But that 6.75, that's what the market is. You and I both know that. So put that in. So he's adopted 6.75. So now all I have to do in 6 months' time is show him by one or two ways that that rent's gone up. And if I can get that rent to 400, bang, there you go. There's my 5.8 million. Which means that in 6 months' time, I could literally put a new valuation in front of the bank and I'll be able to tap into, call it $600,000 worth of equity. All because of the conversation I had with the valuer. But if I go and did the other way and I adopted 390 and I let him go at 7.45, right? Now that value has got to come in 6 months' time and say, hey, Cal, the market's moved 75 bips somehow, but you've done nothing to the asset, but the market's moved 75 bips. It's actually a fundamentally impossible conversation for a valuer to have. So he would be really hard pressed to actually even support that valuation in 6 months' time. He'll be saying, Cal, I can't do it. Go do someone else. So what I'm saying is if it comes down to rent versus cap rate, protect the cap rate. That is the harder thing to move. So protect it. Then what you can do is you can either, as I said, you can increase your rent by one of two ways. Either you just look for market evidence around the place. So what I'll be doing now is I'll be looking for comparable evidence of this over the next 6 months. I'll be going out to every agent in my database. Hey guys, anyone got a fuel station here that's paying $400,000 a year in rent? Please give it to me. Anything that's struck in the last 12 to 18 months, give me the evidence. And they'll just send it through. Here you go, Cal. Here you go, Cal. Here you go, Cal. And I'll just get a little chest of evidence together, 3 or 4 assets. And as long as that their rental levels are higher than 400 or at 400 or above, and they're comparable in any way, shape, or form, I'll just put that in front of the valuer and go, hey, mate, here's new rental evidence, same cap rate. Thank you. You've just given me 600 grand of equity to tap into. That's how money's made in property. Okay. The other mechanism I could do, which is what I'm going to do, as well, so I cover both of my avenues, is I'm going to go to the tenant and say, hey guys, you have no option. You got an 8-year lease. How about I give you a 5-year option or I give you a 15-year lease and you increase your rent to $410,000 a year? Then that's even better than evidence because that is a willing lessee and a willing lessor entering into a new market related transaction. So there's no way that a valuer can say that's not market when it's a brand new conversation between a lessee and a lessor, which is perfect evidence. So if I were to do that, I'll even be comfortable to give the tenant hundreds of thousands of dollars in incentive. I'll go to the tenant and say, hey, can you make it $425,000 a year? And look at what that does. Wow, you're at $6.3 million. So I could even go and offer that tenant 250 grand in cash. Hey, here's 250 grand in cash. And if he can get to $425,000 in net rent, I've just made $1 million in equity. I'll take that equity, buy the next one. Thank you. Cheers, everyone.